Clara Shih, born in Hong Kong, moved to America at age 4, a Stanford and Oxford graduate and best-selling author. Now she's Meta's head of business AI. Clara Shih is in the Changemakers spotlight.
What brought you to your new job here at Meta?
I think that Meta is one of the most consequential companies of our time, and I wasn't looking to leave my previous position, but when Meta called, it was a call that I had to answer, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
And so what was it that you saw at Meta when it came to this idea of building a new group around business AI that seemed like a good fit for you? I mean, Meta's all about social connections. They have this huge ad business. What is it about business AI that makes sense for you?
Well, really, it's Meta's AI leadership. I mean, you look at what Meta has done, making AI accessible to developers around the world. Llama now has over 800 million downloads, and just the democratization of this technology that is so important for both businesses as well as for individuals. You add to that Meta AI for consumers, which has 700 million monthly active users. And then my personal passion, which is bringing these technologies to businesses, because not every business, especially small business, has the ability to hire these large AI teams. And so now we're building business AIs for these small businesses so that even they can benefit from all of this innovation that's happening.
So I know it's still early days since you've joined and since you've been in this role, but what do you see as your goal for the business AI group at Meta?
Well, if you look at what's happening right now with this AI revolution, we're quickly coming to a place where every business, from the very large to the very small, they're going to have a business agent representing it and acting on its behalf, in its voice, the way that businesses today have websites and email addresses. And so I think Meta is incredibly well positioned to build that, given our AI leadership, our investment in this space. And I'm really excited about bringing the new empowerment to every business around the world.
It's amazing how it could really be a democratizing force.
It is, because this stuff is hard. And the big companies get this. They're investing millions in getting access to private models. They're doing fancy things like fine-tuning models. If you're a small business, you own a coffee shop, you own a jewelry shop online, you're distributing through Instagram, you don't have the resources to hire a big AI team. And so now our dream is that they won't have to.
Yeah, it's so interesting to have you join Meta now, because nearly two decades ago when you were working at Salesforce, you saw this opportunity for small businesses to use Facebook as a tool when you created this software, Faceforce. I'm really curious how you were able to recognize the vast potential of a tool, which back then was really in its early days. How do you think about how to spot trends? What is your rubric, your framework for that?
Well, I think in general, I love technology. I'm a geek, and I love understanding when there's new technological capabilities. LLMs, or large language models, it's a great example. But specific to Facebook, something that's always drawn me to Facebook, why I wrote a book called The Facebook Era and started a company called Hearsay Social, is this idea that we can connect every person and every business in the world with each other. And that's something that was very powerful and inspiring to me 15 years ago and continues to drive me today.
But what's so interesting to me is this idea that you identified something as an opportunity that was going to be far bigger than what other people saw. And I'm curious right now, back in 2009, you wrote The Facebook Era. We are in the Facebook era that has continued since 2009. But right now, what are those next technological revolutions that you think are just around the corner, and the way you had an early insight about what was going to be happening almost 2 decades ago?
I always think about how I wish things were, both as a consumer as well as a business person. And that's the opportunity I saw in 2009. Today, I see the same thing. I think the world needs AI in the sense that we need to do better. I mean, we haven't really innovated the consumer internet experience for decades. And all the things that Meta is doing, both on the AI side, as well as with AR and VR, AI glasses, I just think it's so exciting in terms of thinking about how we could really reshape this whole way that we interact with each other.
So what guides you? I mean, you think about what you would like to see, but are you driven by data about how people are already using tools? Are you asking questions of consumers about what they'd like to see? Or is this coming from research? I mean, you have all these degrees and have a deep understanding of the underlying technology. What is the original spark that gets you excited to think about how to use these tools?
You're too kind. So I love to learn, and I love to ask questions, and I feel like I'm always learning from anyone and anything that I possibly can. And my other passion is I love building things. I love building teams, building companies, building technology products. And so I think when those things come together, I end up doing really interesting and fun things.
And so if you look at where we are right now in this AI revolution, where do you think we're going to be in 5 years, and what role do you think Meta will play in the AI ecosystem 5 years or even 10 years from now, if you could think that far out? Because I can't imagine AI 10 years from now.
Well, no one has a crystal ball, certainly not me, but I like to imagine. And I see what's happening now with all of these consumers interacting with Meta AI. And very soon, people are going to look to Meta AI as their AI assistant to do all kinds of things, from researching products to planning trips, planning social outings with their friends. On the business side, we're building business AIs from Meta, and we already have these trusted relationships with 200 million small businesses around the world. They're using WhatsApp, they're using Facebook, they're using Instagram, both to acquire customers, but also engage and deepen each of those relationships. Very soon, each of those businesses are going to have these AIs that can represent them and help automate redundant tasks, help speak in their voice, help them find more customers, and provide almost like a concierge service to every single one of their customers 24/7. And so you think about the consumers, the businesses coming together. And then on the developer side, and for large enterprises who do have big AI teams, they're already using our Llama models in its various forms. And we want to continue to provide that open access, because we don't believe that AI should be owned by just one company. We want to open it to everybody.
There are still a lot of fears around AI and what AI is going to mean for a number of different things, but specifically on this question of whether it'll replace jobs. How do you address that question of the threat that AI might pose to the workforce, and how to approach that?
I think about that a lot, and there's so many interesting analogies to draw from what happened in the late 90s with the internet. I mean, it started in certain sectors, right, in media, in retail, but we look today, 20, 30 years later, there isn't a single job that hasn't been completely transformed by the internet and by mobile and by social media. I think we're at the same juncture now with AI, where it's clear that there are certain professions where AI will significantly change the job, but my prediction is that over time, AI will change every job function across every industry. And there's ways that we can anticipate, there's ways that we can't. I think the best way forward is for every individual and every company to learn, to experiment, to understand, and to almost define what that could look like for their particular job.
One of the other questions when it comes to the ethical use of AI is making sure that AI is not spreading misinformation or disinformation, and that it's not trained on biased information. At the beginning, there was so much concern that AI was being trained on the entirety of the internet. There's a lot of stuff on there that's either not true or maybe not safe. How do you address those concerns?
It's a very big and legitimate concern. And again, one of the things that drew me to Meta is how committed the company is to investing in this area of trust and safety, not just for Meta, but in an open way. Llama Guard is a great example of a set of technologies that we've open sourced to developers to make sure that everything from proprietary data to sensitive data to bias data, that we're correcting for it, we're checking for it, and that we're getting better and better over time.
And how do you think of the role of trust in making sure that AI is adopted by businesses? I mean, if you're going to be working with businesses large and small, how do you think about trust and AI when it comes to them?
Trust is everything. That's where we start. And the same was true with the internet. I remember the early days. I remember people saying, "Oh, I'll never buy anything online because I don't trust it." And it's a legitimate concern. And so this is why it's so important to invest in those safeguards. And we're not going to get it right 100% of the time, the first time, right? But we're going to keep learning, and as a community, and again, this is why it's so important that we open it to the community. It's not just one company doing it, that together we'll figure out those gaps and cover those gaps with smart solutions.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Another question that may hit close to home for you is this question about gender gaps when it comes to AI, because the vast majority of AI researchers are men, and there's a lot of data showing that men are far more likely to use AI as a tool in their everyday lives than women are. Are you concerned about a new digital divide around adoption of AI, and could part of the population be left behind?
That's always a concern. Again, one of the things that that really drew me to Meta, in addition to my own role, is if you look at who's in charge of Meta AI for consumers, it's Sue Young, one of my female colleagues. If you look at who's in charge of FAIR, our research lab, it's Joelle, right? So it's another female colleague. And I just think that's so incredibly rare and also so incredibly important that we have people from different backgrounds and experiences creating these technologies and also using these technologies.
Well, you're part of the important diversity here in terms of creating the next AI engines and the new AI use cases. But I want to shift gears from all of your accomplishments in this AI space to where you came from and all the forces and experiences that shaped you into the leader you are today. You immigrated to Chicago from Hong Kong when you were 4 years old.
Via Ohio.
Via Ohio. Reflecting back on those early years, how did that shape who you are as a leader?
I come from humble beginnings, and my parents, they love to this day America so much, and my story is very much one of the American dream. And so we came here, we really didn't know what we were doing. This is pre-internet. Their research was not that great prior to showing up. And it was hard those first few years. And I'd say the way it shaped me was having that work ethic that was role modeled by both of my parents. No job was ever beneath them, right? They did whatever it took to take care of our family. And that was really impactful for both my brother and me. But then the other part of it was just this realization that anything was possible. And I remember my grandmother in Hong Kong, she took us to the airport, and I was 4 years old, and we knew it'd be a while before we saw her again. And she said, just go get him, right? Knock him dead. And her belief in us and her letting us go, even though we're incredibly close, it really has been so inspiring to me just to really make the most of this incredible gift that was given to me by my parents and by her letting us go.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously you feel so passionate about your work, and it's funny hearing you say anything is possible, because now the technology is making things possible that no one could have even conceived of even 10 years ago. One thing I thought was interesting is that your parents' lives underwent massive change, professional changes when they moved here. Tell us about their careers and what you learned from their own reinventions.
Yeah, so my mom was an artist and an art teacher back in Hong Kong. In my house now, I have all of our paintings up. My dad was a math professor. And when they came to the US, like so many immigrants, their degrees weren't recognized. And so they had to start over. And they both, I think they were shocked, but then they got over it quickly. And they just did all kinds of odds and end jobs, right? They shoveled snow in the driveway of our apartment complex. My mom used puffy paints to design sweatshirts, and she made $1 per sweatshirt. I mean, it was just whatever it took, and it took them a while. And then they also went back to school to learn English, and then my mom ended up getting a master's degree and then a PhD in education, and they just kept at it. They kept hustling, they kept striving, and really shaped me and my brother.
And so striving and reinvention, do you feel like, I mean, clearly you've strived so hard in so many different areas, but do you feel like you've reinvented yourself as the technology has evolved?
Yes, constantly. And that's the name of the game in technology, is that you can't rest on your laurels, and especially in this space of AI that is evolving, not just daily, it's evolving multiple times a day. You really have to stay on top of it and enjoy it, and I do.
Yeah, you seem to thrive on that. It was fascinating reading about your high school, the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy. Graduating from this high school, co-founders of Yelp, YouTube, PayPal, OkCupid, Sparks Notes, and then there are about a dozen others. What was in the water at your high school?
It was nerd school, for sure. I don't know, it was just selected for kids all across the state of Illinois. It's a public school, so accessible to all. And we did math problem sets after class, and it was a very unusual and special experience that I really cherish.
But it was not just about math and science and the nerd stuff. It was also somehow created a whole generation of entrepreneurs. What about that created so many entrepreneurs? Or do you think it was just your personal experience coming from a family of immigrants?
I mean, I was certainly inspired by many of my classmates. I think it was us learning how to program, learning how to code at a young age. This was in the late 90s, and the timing was so perfect because, as we came of age, as we graduated from high school and sought out computer science and engineering degrees in college, that was right during the dot-com boom, and just as Silicon Valley was really taking off. And so I feel really fortunate to have been a part of that. The timing was excellent, and I had great mentors and role models.
Yeah, I mean, your career was a rocket ship. I think we met at a Fortune Brainstorm conference maybe less than 20 years ago, but I remember you always being one of the youngest people in the room, holding your own with tech leaders who are decades older than you. You're often the only woman in the room. You were so young in so many situations where the stakes were so high. Did you ever feel intimidated? I mean, you launched your company at 27. How did you navigate that?
Well, I think that part does go back to my immigrant roots. It's just feeling like I'm not like everybody else, and that being very difficult as a young child, but then that becoming the norm and feeling comfortable that, imposter syndrome, just sit with it and just roll with it anyway.
Yeah, and do you feel like there was a moment in your professional career where you figured out how to navigate challenging or uncomfortable professional situations?
I'd say it's an ongoing struggle, but it's like with anything, with practice it gets easier.
Yeah, well, you certainly have accomplished so much in so many different companies now, but do you think there's something about your leadership style that has evolved over time? How are you different as leader now than you were when you were 27 founding Hearsay?
Oh, well, I have a lot of scar stories, and I think I've realized that about leadership is that sometimes the best way to grow as a leader is to make mistakes and to be in environments where that you're supported and coached through it. And I think making those mistakes also has made me a more empathetic leader and able to spot different patterns that people on the team might be falling into and being able to be more helpful.
So to that end, what was the most valuable mistake you ever made? A mistake that yielded the biggest learnings?
Oh my goodness, we could be here all day. I mean, I made mistakes about hiring people too fast, falling in love with someone's resume or when they went to college versus really going deep and understanding their experience. I've made mistakes around hiring too many people who are very similar to me versus specifically seeking out a group of people that has complementary skill sets and backgrounds and different perspectives. And then strategically, business-wise, right, just learning how to compete, learning how to stay 2 steps ahead of the market, see around corners. And that's something I learned a lot there from Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. So the list goes on.
Yeah, it's fascinating looking at the founders that you have worked for and with. You were on the board of Starbucks with Howard Schultz, worked with Mark Benioff at Salesforce, now with Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. These are not just successful CEOs, these are iconic founders who really created specific cultures and game-changing businesses. What do you think you learned from each of them?
I love founders. I love founders because they care so much about every detail and they just understand the business in a way that nobody else possibly can. There's also this longevity to the commitment, right? It's never just a job. Even once the founder retires or moves on, they're always part of the company and part of the brand. And there's something about that ownership mindset that is so inspiring to me.
And do you think it changes the culture at a company? Do you think founder-led companies have a different culture?
I do. I think it's just a more mission-oriented culture. And I mean, here, just for example, I'm so inspired every day by how Meta makes decisions, not just for the next quarter, but for decades to come. And that kind of conviction, I mean, I think life is short and you just got to think big to accomplish big things.
Yeah, the investment in AI. I got to demo the Orion glasses, which were a long-term bet. I mean, that technology has been in the works for so long. To have this augmented reality come to the fore and become actually possible now. And it's so fascinating. I mean, you obviously have admired Mark Zuckerberg for a long time. He sparked your product back when you were at Salesforce decades ago. What do you think you've learned from him about how to continue innovating?
I think it's just never feeling complacent and never losing that appetite to take risks and to try different things and to experiment.
Well, certainly a lot of experimentation, especially in this AI space. Now, Zuckerberg got a lot of attention recently when he said he thinks companies need more masculine energy. What do you take away from that? What does that mean?
So I listened to the whole podcast, and I would encourage anyone who has just listened to that snippet to listen to the whole context.
It's a long podcast.
It's a long podcast, but it's worth it. And first of all, he first talks about it in the context of his personal jiu-jitsu, his martial arts. But I think the broader point he's making, which I agree with, is that in any individual, in any company, there needs to be a balance between different types of energy. And if you look at, from my culture, right, there's yin and yang.
Yeah.
And the really neat thing about yin and yang is that yin at its strongest point, right, it has yang in the middle. And yang at its strongest point, it has yin in the middle. And I think it's a great metaphor. However you define, right, these different opposing forces, they're complementary, and also there's a healthy tension. And so when things go out of balance, that's when, in Chinese culture, like, we believe people get sick.
Yeah. And
companies, right, if the pendulum swings too far one way or the other. And so I very much believe in that message of balance.
Yeah, the power of balance. It's interesting. I interviewed Fiji Simo, and she is a longtime Meta employee now running Instacart. She said the exact same thing. She said, you need masculine energy. Everyone needs masculine energy, and everyone needs positive energy. So I think it's a really interesting thing to keep in mind. Now, speaking of leaders at Meta, Sheryl Sandberg, though no longer here, was one of your mentors. She is still one of your mentors. What have you learned from her over the years?
Oh my gosh, again, we could be here all day talking about that. I think, if I had to pick, one is just excellence, right? This commitment to excellence, but also recognition that, done is better than perfect. And that sometimes just getting something out there and being vulnerable and sharing an early raw idea with your colleagues, with your customer, that's the best way to get the feedback you need to get from, the initial draft to something that is perfect.
And do you think that's because it can't be perfect until you get the feedback from users?
Yes. And I think a lot of people, like me in the past, used to, be scared. I was like driven by insecurity, didn't want to show someone something until I was absolutely sure. But then I realized I actually can't be sure until I show people.
Yeah, so you got to have that vulnerable moment when you're getting that final data that you need. So do you have mentees now, and what do you advise them?
I do, and I learn actually just as much, if not more, from my mentees as I feel like I tell them. But I just try to encourage people to try a lot of different things until you find something that doesn't feel like work. And then that's when you know that you're willing to put the hours in, maybe that others wouldn't, who aren't as passionate about that area.
You have worked with so many icons: Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg, Howard Schultz. Are there any people you really admire, even rivals or people you don't know well, that you look up to?
So many people. I love reading biographies. I love reading people's books and their podcasts and watching videos, because I just think there's so much we can learn. There's not one person where I want to emulate every single thing about them, right? Because ultimately, each one of us is our own person. But I do feel like from every person that I meet, just about, there's something that I can learn from them.
You can pull something different from each one. You've had such a long career through all these different companies. Is there something that you know now in this office here in Meta that you wished you had known 20 years ago when you were starting off your career?
Again, a lot of things.
Yeah, but about leadership or business, or maybe it's that vulnerability piece you just mentioned.
Yes, I think the vulnerability piece was a very big one. I think just because I felt like I had so much to prove as a woman and as a minority, and I just wish that I had been more comfortable with who I was earlier on and shown myself more compassion.
How did you get over that? Other than time, what's the hack for that?
I wish there were one. Just hitting rock bottom and feeling so burned out at my own company at Hearsay, and then realizing I'm not defined by my success on paper. I'm not defined by an external validation. I'm worthy no matter what.
So how do you avoid burnout now? And what happened when you realized you had that kind of burnout?
I left my startup, something that I never thought that I would do. I realized that it was time to put my own health and my family first for the first time, because before that I'd always put school or work or my company first. That was a big shift for me in my life.
And what was the moment when you realized that was the right call?
It was in 2020, and it was so hard to be a leader of an organization, and I felt like I'd accumulated years of debt with my family, of not being there for important milestones, for birthdays, for celebrations, just for the everyday. And even when I was home, I wasn't totally mentally present. And then COVID happened, and it just really kind of broke me. And I just realized that, it was time for me to do a hard reset on my life.
And so what came from that? I mean, COVID was such a time of reflection for so many people, and it sounds like for you really drove transformative change.
Yes. So for the first time in my life, I didn't work. I didn't do anything. I just took 6 months off.
What was it like?
It was very uncomfortable at first, and then it was incredible. Just to be able to not have a schedule, and just to finally be present with myself and with my son. And I'd had some health issues, just an autoimmune issue, and I suddenly felt healthy again after that.
And so how did that give you clarity about how you wanted to spend your time when you returned to work?
It made me realize that I'd never want to get to that point again. And now I can tell when I'm starting to not be as present as I want, or feeling fatigue, or just not making the right choices. And it gives me pause in a good way.
Do you have rituals or practices that help you stay in some sort of balance? And I say some sort of balance because there's, people always say there's no such thing as true balance, but what do you do to keep yourself on the right track?
I think, scheduling in regular time with people who are important to me, and then scheduling just time for myself. And I'm not going to stick to it every time, but by and large, having that there, right? Just like we have recurring one-on-ones with people that we work with, why wouldn't we do that with our moms and our best friends and our children and our spouses?
And what about your personal hacks? Because I was fascinated to learn that you lived on the same block as your company to minimize the risk of commute time.
It's true. So I'm someone who, for a long time, I'm slightly better now, not a morning person. And what drove me crazy wasn't just the commute, but was the uncertainty around how much traffic there would be. And so this is when I was running my startup. And so I convinced my husband to move to the same block as Hearsay. And so it was very predictable. I knew it was a 2.5 minute walk there and 2.5 minute walk back. And it was a game changer for us.
It really allowed you to, I'm sure, spend more time with your family. So what are your hacks now? Or what would your advice be to people watching about life hacks that they may not have thought of?
It sounds so simple, but it's just thinking about the things that are frustrating to you. Like in my case, it was traffic and commuting and being late. And often, if you think about it, there are simple solutions. And yeah, it's a pain to move, but it's often worth it.
Yeah, and certainly could be a game changer. So as we wrap up here, do you have any advice to people either about how they should be thinking about AI, or how they should be thinking about navigating this new world we're in, where it's constantly changing? You've reinvented yourself. Companies are reinventing themselves. How do we sort this all out?
I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I work in the field, AI is the most important, impactful technology in our generation, more so than the internet. And just like in 1990, right, we had to learn email, we had to learn search. I think today, everyone, regardless of where they live, what job they have or want to have, needs to learn AI. And it's, the good news though, is it's AI actually makes it easy to learn AI.
You can talk to it.
You can literally talk to it. And something that I often do is, if there's long research papers, AI research papers, or there's developments, you can ask AI. You can go to Meta AI, and it'll break it down for you. You can ask it, explain this at a 9th grade level, explain this at a 5th grade level, and it'll do it, and you can kind of go back and forth. And so that's how I learn a lot of the more complicated topics.
So you think we should all not be intimidated by it and use these tools to actually help explain the most complicated things in basic English?
Yes, it's a little meta, if you will.
Yeah,
no pun intended.
A little meta. I want the 9th grade version of all this technology.
Yes.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end on. Clara, thank you so much for taking the time with us today and having us to your beautiful office here in San Francisco.
Thank you.